Good evening, and welcome to Iowa News and Views. My name's Gary Sanders, and I'm your guest host this evening. Iowa News and Views is a community affairs program on issues and concerns to you, the Iowa viewer. I want to welcome tonight Senator Paul Wellstone of Minnesota, who's going to be our guest for the next half hour. Senator, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I like the philosophy of Iowa News and Views. I mean, engaging the public and making sure that we have discussion about public affairs and issues that affect people's lives. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Now you're supposed to like me. I started out in a very nice way now.
I'm ready to like you. I was ready to like you years ago, but I was more ready to like you last night, Senator, when before a cheering crowd of 400 Democrats, Johnson County Democrats, you said that you represented the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party and brought the crowd to its feet. Would you go from there?
You have to have a twinkle in your eye, and I remember I said I represent the Democratic Party wing of the Democratic Party, and what I was trying to say, because I think people are sick and tired of all this slash and burn politics, constant attack. What I was trying to say with a twinkle in my eye is that the Democratic Party has been a grand party, and at its best when it's focused on economic opportunities for all the people, improving the standard of living for all the people in our country, when the focus has been on the economic justice issues, the workaday majority issues, the kitchen table issues, and I think the Democratic Party has lost its way, and we don't have that same really strong identity on education and living wage jobs and jobs at decent wages and universal health care coverage and environmental protection, and willing to take on some of the concentrations of power in telecommunications, in banking and industry. We have to become a kind of fighting party for working families and their children in a way that I don't think we've been. So that's what I was trying to say.
What do you think's caused this drift away from, as you mentioned last night, FDR, Truman, Kennedy? What's caused us to drift away from that into a more centrist party?
Well, I think, first of all, the center, with the public, is around these economic opportunity issues. That's what people are focused on. How can I earn a decent living, and how can I give my children the care I know they need and deserve. I think that the reason that Democrats nationally, there are exceptions. Senator Tom Harkin is a good exception. He's a strong justice senator. I think the reason the Democratic Party in Washington has really kind of lost its bearing on these issues is not because these aren't winning issues, they are, but I think it has a lot to do with this mix of money and politics that you hear about. I think the compelling need to raise money, the kind of commercial logic, if you will, of the parties, has led to a situation where in many ways both parties are owned and controlled by the same investors. So Gary, the policy performance of the Democratic Party has been weakened by the necessity of raising the big money, in which case people in the country say, we're not so sure that our concerns are of any concern to either one of these parties. That's our challenge.
Right. And if for example, the last election, more than 50% didn't even bother voting, and this has been continuing, why would somebody, after hearing you, a staunch Democrat, say, well, heck, if he's saying that the Democratic Party has lost its way and it's due to big money and both parties are taking big money, why shouldn't we start a third party?
Yeah. Well, that's, of course, an age-old debate that goes back for at least a century. I think third parties have played a really positive role in our country. Sometimes third parties introduce perspectives into the political dialogue that neither of the two parties will do. Joel Rogers at the University of Wisconsin in Madison has, a new party has, for example, really operates on that premise. For my own part, it's a sort of the political scientist in me. We are we have a system which is a single-member district plurality vote. One person wins in the races. That person who gets the most votes wins. That's a tough environment for third parties. It's not a system of proportional representation. And I think that, to me, what makes the most sense is to dig in. I believe in the Democratic Party. I believe the Democratic Party has done wonderful things for people in the country. So I'm sort of believe that that my work should be within the Democratic Party. I think we ought to reform the Democratic Party. I think we ought to make it a party of economic justice issues. We ought to not just have big money TV campaigns. We need to be more connected to people, and that's my commitment. Other people can make a different commitment, but I think we can make the Democratic Party a party that is real important to people in the country.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to be able to be successful in your efforts to do something about campaign finance reform?
Well, I'm worried. I mean, I really love what happened in Maine and Vermont. It's called the Clean Money, Clean Election option. They've just basically have gotten almost all of the interested private money out. Mm-hmm. I think that I introduced the bill to do that in Washington. That's not going to happen right away. I'd love to lessen the special interest influence. I'd love for there to be more of a level playing field. I'd love to stop this obscene money chase. I don't think those of us in office or those of us who were challenged should have to spend so much time raising money. The McCain-Feingold bill is a step in the right direction. I support it. Mm-hmm. But
what are its realistic chances?
Well, the McCain-Feingold bill, which is getting very weakened down, and I'm real worried that before it's all over, that what passes won't be what John McCain and Russ Feingold, I've sponsored the bill, really want, but something which doesn't even represent a step forward, but a great leap sideways. I mean, I'd hate for us to pass something that has a great title, but basically keeps all the same money in. I'm very worried about that will happen, but I'm still got a hope for the best.
Well, see, this is what amazes people, okay? That people are so disconnected from major league politics because they see these fat cats going to both parties. And here we had a great idea that was bipartisan in nature, and now it's being watered down, and frankly, as you just said, what it's going to come out is not what we started with. So what realistic hope is there? Well,
listen, there's always realistic hope, because we live in the United States of America. I mean, my father was a Jewish immigrant who fled persecution in Russia, and he taught me, look, Paul, you might think things are unfair, but remember, this is an open system. We have the right to speak out and organize, and if the Congress doesn't get the job done, if the Congress doesn't even get 1/4 of the job done, which I think would be a step forward, then I think eventually it will happen, because I think people in the country are not going to let Republicans, or for that matter Democrats, get away with not passing reform. I mean, people in the country are just going to have to turn the heat up. This isn't over. This isn't over by any means.
All right. Now, last night, another one at the Johnson County Democratic Fall Barbecue, you also emphasized education as a way to deal with our problems of unemployment and poverty in this country. What are the Democrats realistically proposing on this, and what are the chances with the Republican-dominated Senate and House?
Well, there's two different parts to this. Right now, with the dominated Senate and House, it's really only kind of a lot of the what you hope for is stopping the worst as opposed to doing the better. And there can be small victories, but it cannot be anywhere near the kind of education agenda that we should have for the country. And let me talk a little bit about what that is, because for me this is so important. First of all, I think we got to education's not K through 12. I mean, it's sort of, we shouldn't even talk about it that way anymore. We know it's beyond 12 because there's higher education. It really ought to be pre-K to 85. I mean, education's important throughout our lives. Well, yeah, but the point is many men and women find themselves downsized, and now they've tried to make a shift to another kind of employment, and they need to go back to school in order to get the skills that they need. I mean, many of our students are no longer 18, living in a dorm. They're older. They're back in the community colleges. So that's first point. And then the second point is, we now know, on the basis of the neuroscience evidence, on the basis of medical studies, the evidence is irreducible, it's irrefutable, that we got to get it right for our children in the very early years. Otherwise, by age 3, many children in our country will never be ready for school or ready for life. We got to make a really strong commitment to good developmental child care. I mean, I see that as a grandpa. I mean, when one of our grandchildren, our 2-year-old, is in our home, every 15 seconds he's interested in something new. There's a small children experiencing all the unnamed magic of the world that's before them. We got to stir that in kids. We can't put cold water on it.
Right, but now the Republicans will say that's the responsibility of the parents.
Yeah.
And what is big government doing bothering with that?
Well, look, the argument, and too many Democrats have caved into this. That's why I say I've been in Iowa representing the Democratic Party, wing of the Democratic Party. The argument that when it comes to the most pressing issues of your lives, there's nothing the government can or should do, is a great argument if you own your own large corporation or you're wealthy. not if you're, but not for most of the people. And people know darn well. You've got a couple in Iowa. They're in their mid-30s. They have 2 small children. Their combined income is $32,000 a year. Child care can cost up to $6,000 a year. Of course we ought to have some sort of investment here so that it's affordable for families.
Well, I mean, it makes perfect sense, and I'm sure it makes perfect sense to most of our viewers. But then why is it that the party in power, in the House and the Senate, we have 5 members of the U.S. House in Iowa, all Republicans. We have 1 Republican U.S. Senator. Why do these issues make so much sense to you and to, as I said, most of our viewers, but somehow when it comes time to November, they don't vote that way? What's happening here?
I think there are 3 things that are happening. First of all, I think all too often people believe that when it comes to our concerns, the concerns and circumstances of our lives, people in politics are not going to really represent us, in which case you have barely half the people voting in a presidential election, and that hole in the electorate is disproportionately working families, low and moderate income working families. So that's one thing that's happened. I think a second thing that's happened is that, again, the Democratic Party has not been, there are exceptions. Tom Harkin is a good exception, has not been nearly as strong as it could be. Bob Rush is another exception in focusing in on these economic issues. And the third thing that's happened is, and I hate this, and this has nothing to do with either party, it's more important than either party, I think people have become so disengaged and so disaffected toward politics that this is undercutting our democracy. When people say, hey, there's nothing I can do about any of this. I don't want to, I've only got a few hours every day where I can relax, or an hour. I'm not going to spend my time involved in the community on different issues or in politics because nothing good will happen. Then what happens is we have a mini democracy. We don't have the people participating. We almost have to sort of, if you will, we have to kind of almost recapture a democracy in this country. I mean, we really do. We have to sort of rebuild a democracy in our country.
Well, I hate to say this since we're on television, but is it even possible to recapture democracy when both sides use commercials that are so negative and so distorting that the electorate really doesn't even get to learn, what the candidates stand for?
Yeah, of course it's possible. I mean, I'm not a big fan of these capital-intensive, manipulative, slash and burn, hack attack TV ads. I think they turn people off. What we've got are kind of high-tech, low-touch campaigns, and people that are running for office just aren't out in the communities, and that's another reason for low turnout. But I think there's real hope. Minnesota's a good example. We did a really good job. I mean, once a week I just turned and talked to the TV camera and made a substantive argument. A substantive argument about the environment, about jobs, about health care, about education, about reform, as opposed to all this vicious attack, and it was vicious. You know what? People in Minnesota, even people that didn't agree with me on issues, voted for me because they said, look, you have conducted yourself honorably and we're sick of this. So I think people are starting to turn against it. And we were everywhere in the state in terms of being out in the community, and we had this capacity to turn people out in the last week of our campaign in Minnesota. During the day, we were able to make up to about 10 p.m. at night, 10,000 get out the vote calls every hour, all made by people in Minnesota. That's a lot of volunteers.
That sure is. But you mentioned the half hour of real issues, and I remember in Perot's campaign in '92 with the flip charts, it seemed to resonate with people, that he just had a very simple simple message that he was doing, and he was speaking to people as if they were intelligent.
That's right.
Now, why can't more people running for office do that?
You just really made an important point. I mean, it should be a given. It shouldn't be like anything earth-shattering for someone to treat people as if they have intelligence. But I think that above and beyond being connected to the concerns and circumstances of people's lives, standard of living issues, speaking to people who are concerned about how to make a decent living and raise their children successfully, really being about supporting families, being, I think, and about reform and getting money out of politics and a more honest political process. You know what else matters? I think if people believe that you believe what you're saying, and that you're treating them with intelligence and that you're telling them the truth, it should be a given. It shouldn't even be startling, but I think it means a lot to people.
Yeah. You're watching, by the way, Iowa News and Views, your half hour around the state of hard news without commercial interruption. All right, Senator
Without commercial interruption.
Senator Wellstone from Minnesota is our guest. Last night in Iowa City, he spoke to a cheering throng of 400 people at the Johnson County Democratic Fall Fundraiser. And we're really proud and pleased to have Senator Wellstone on the show. You know, Senator, C-SPAN was here last night and filming it, and that brings to mind that are they possibly doing the Road to the White House 2000 and starting right here with your appearance in Johnson County?
They could possibly be doing that, with the emphasis being on possible. I mean, I love traveling, I love meeting with people, I love speaking out on these issues. I am going to continue to say, look, I'm representing the Democratic Party, wing of the Democratic Party. It's time for the Democratic Party to be strong on these economic justice issues and to be a progressive party, and this is a winning politics. I haven't made a decision yet about whether to run for president. I love doing this anyway, and I will continue to travel and speak, and I've been doing some other travel which is focused on poverty in the country, and I will continue to do that. Whether I run for president or not, it'd be determined in part on the response of people, and also, you know, I got to spend time with my own family, and we got to decide. I was a teacher. I'm not going to have the big dollars. I'd have to do it very differently, and if I do it, it'll have to be very, very grassroots. But I haven't made that decision yet. But it's good for me to be out here, and Iowa is a great place for me to be. I mean, for a lot of obvious reasons. I mean, Iowa will be for me, see, Iowa is a perfect state because, not only because I'm a senator from Minnesota and we're Midwesterners, but also it's still living room politics. Right. It's not all this, you got to have zillions of dollars to be on TV. You got to, in campaigning in Iowa, you got to be out there touching people and being touched by people. I love that. Right. I love that.
No, it certainly showed last night as people repeatedly stood and cheered for you. But, you know, you unabashedly are liberal, and that's what the Republicans have used to tar the Democrats with very effectively. You know, Reagan, Bush, that was their whole mantra, was that their opponents were liberal. How are you going to counter that?
I just will say, hey, listen, everybody, let them use whatever label they want to. I'm proud of who I am, and you know my record, and you know the issues I'm talking about. But don't let these folks distract you, okay? Let's just sort of keep our eye on the prize, our eye on the ball, and let's talk about what matters. And yeah, it is true that, you know, these folks that are on the attack, I mean, oil companies and pharmaceutical companies and big insurance companies and big tobacco companies, they don't like me much, but they already have great representation in Washington. It's the rest of the people that need it, and that's what I'll keep saying.
Well, you know, also last night you mentioned that you thought possibly the next great civil rights movement in this country was going to be with unions organizing the unorganized.
Yes.
With labor unions at 15% of the workforce, do you think this is something that's realistically possible with our new leaders at the AFL-CIO, or is this a movement that's swelling up from the country, or both? Or what do you see as the dynamic here?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that John Sweeney and Rich Trumka's election was terribly important. John Sweeney was president of a wonderful union, SEIU, Service Employees International Union. The majority of the membership are women. Very focused on the economic justice issues, and he's hiring very good organizers, and they are focused on what, interestingly enough, was the if you will, battle cry of labor in the 30s, which was the need to organize the unorganized. I think it's not only noble, I don't think labor will survive any other way. You just cited the statistic.
Right.
Frankly, if that's what Sweeney's election was all about. If you were going to continue to have the AFL-CIO run by some power brokers, not connected to community people, not out there organizing in the community, not making coalitions with neighborhood organizations and with women and environmentalists and others, labor was not going to go anywhere. But I think there is enormous potential, and since I think the most important issues to people in the country right now are these standard of living issues, I mean, we have this paradox where all the economic statistics looks great. On low levels of unemployment, officially defined, GDP looks great, productivity up, economic growth up. You know what? When that's happening in our country, wage levels are supposed to be going up. They're going down.
Right.
They're going down. So for the missing middle, the vast majority of people in the country, this focus on jobs at decent wages and decent health care and being able to afford child care and having a good family income, that's what matters.
Well, in 2000, let's say that you have decided that you're going to make a run for this, and let's just say hypothetically that Al Gore and Dick Gephardt are your two main competitors. How are you three going to avoid a slash and burn in the primary season so that the Democratic Party can come out with a good, strong message against whoever the Republican nominee is?
Well, I can't speak for them, although I think they would. I don't believe that that's what they would be interested in. I won't do it.
Okay.
So I can answer that question.
So that's your pledge to the voters of Iowa here and now?
But of course, but you know what? It isn't even noble. It's the only way to win. I mean, it's the only way to win. I mean, there comes a point in time where people are just kind of tired of hearing about what you're against, and they're more interested in hearing what you're for.
Do you think it turns people off to the Democratic Party? This is a tough one. That our vice president has the possibility of being indicted on this campaign spending?
I think people are turned off by the whole system, and I think that they don't like what they're hearing or reading, but I also think that some of the people that are most on the attack on the vice president are just sort of interested in destroying him personally, and they're not interested in reform at all, and that's what really makes me angry. Look, should he have made calls in government building? No. Is that the biggest issue, whether he made it from the White House or made it from his office as opposed to walking 100 yards to a private office and making the same calls? I think the real issue is all the ways in which big money has come to dominate the political process. So on the one hand, no, it wasn't the right thing to do. On the other hand, should that be used to destroy him? Absolutely not.
No.
And are there bigger issues? Yes.
Of course, but we've seen time and time again, whether it's the Willie Horton ad, whatever it is,
well, I got news for you and everybody that's listening. I want to tell you, believe me, the Republican, there are plenty of arrows to sling on all sides.
It's like, how do they get away with the whole message of the welfare queen when, as you have so eloquently said in the past, that the real welfare queens are the people in the boardrooms who are getting these unbelievable subsidies. How can we get that message out?
Well, we can get that message out by getting that message out.
Okay.
And that's why I've been and I think, frankly, a lot of Democrats, not all, but have too often been either not willing to say that, or they say it but they don't act on it. These are the heavy hitters. These are the well-connected. These are the big givers. These are the very folks that, all too many people in politics depend upon for election or re-election. But we ought to be taking that on.
You've been in the Senate long enough. Do your colleagues there just think you're out of touch with the realities of modern day, electioneering and campaigning?
No. People, sometimes I go against the grain and am in some pretty fierce debates, but no, I don't think so. There is this kind of code, which is kind of interesting, an insider's code, so right away people might say, uh-oh, we hate this, but I kind of respect it. I think the fact that in our second race in Minnesota, I was so targeted. I mean, there was this national attack machine, you know, he's going to lose. And the fact that I didn't weaver bob and just stayed very clear on issues, and we really ended up winning by a big margin. I don't think anybody thinks that, A, I don't know how to campaign, or B, I'm not a serious politician, or C, I don't know how to win. Mm-hmm. No, I think people take it pretty seriously.
That they think they now realize that that the issues you're talking about are resonating with people. And that the voter can see through the smoke
Especially
screen.
in Minnesota, because I had, with all the labeling, see, a good part of my organizing background was with farmers, so my base was more in rural Minnesota. That's how I came to know Dixon Terry, who was such a great farm activist from Iowa. I did extremely well in blue-collar neighborhoods in the east side of St. Paul. Usually, if you're a liberal from the metro area, although we lived in Northfield in southern Minnesota, but you're not supposed to do well in the Iron Range, the minor. That's my base. So in some ways, I come at this from such a kind of regular person, working class, you know, working family base that we did great, and I'm real proud of that.
Do you consider yourself to be a populist in the grand style of the early 20th century and continuing on through George McGovern, Hubert Humphrey?
Yeah, sure.
And this is how you see, you know, you're the next 2.5 years taking this populist message across this state and possibly even New Hampshire, possibly other states?
I think populist, if by what is meant by that.
And I didn't mean to label you.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think that the history of populism is a sort of a tricky one.
Okay.
And you can get into a demagogic populism, and it can be too much bashing and a little bit too much of politics of hatred. Some of what Pat Buchanan said last presidential election, I think, was important. But then some of what he did, I think, verged on kind of a politics of bashing. So I think you got to be very careful to avoid that. But yeah, I'm a strong progressive, strong populist, and proud of that. Senator from Minnesota.
Right. Well, if you had maybe 30 seconds to just wrap this up here, can you do a 30-second soundbite for the viewers across Iowa here?
Can I do a 30-second sound?
Is that possible?
Sure it is. I'd love to visit. I mean, I've met a lot of people who should be famous, and I'm very committed to public service and honored to be a senator from Minnesota, and like being here in Iowa, and I may be back more than once.
Well, I hope you are, because frankly, I think I'm not a totally objective viewer, but I thought your message of economic justice last night truly resonated with the people like I have not heard here in many, many years. And I have the feeling that if you could get out around the state, as this TV show will do, that you're going to do really well here.
If I do run for president, I will be all around the state. That's the only way to do it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Senator Paul Wellstone of Minnesota. Thank you to our viewers and our sponsors and the great crew we have today. We will see you all next time on Iowa News and Views. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thanks.